the room. And in fact, tonight, when we're focusing on the role of the chair and engaging people, board members in the board, we are going to do a bit of revision of material that we've covered in previous sessions. So I'll refer to those briefly, but you can check out in more detail by going back and having a look at the videos on the Facebook site for those particular sessions that I refer to. Okay, so so tonight we're going to look at particularly the role of the chair, and we're going to look at that under 4 C's, which kind of summarise that person's key responsibilities. And although we're looking at this from the chair's point of view, this is also quite useful stuff for anyone interested in the in having better meetings, in the running of the meetings themselves. Because in any organisation there is always someone who is appointed as the chair, but that never precludes the possibility of backseat sharing. In the same way you can have backseat driving, so other people can pick up things that are missed as well. And we do put a lot on chairs, so one of my personal agendas is to try and help distribute some of those responsibilities amongst other people as well, so it's not too big a burden on one person. Okay, so the first C that I want to focus on in terms of the role of the chair is ensuring clarity of purpose. So this is about helping the board keep focused on the most important things. So there's a couple of seats over here. If you want to split up, you can go to the opposite side of the room. Okay, so this first C, clarity of purpose, is about the board's role in helping the board members at the meeting keep focused, not wander, not be distracted, but in particular it's about keeping focused on the mission, vision and values of the organisation, because that's going to be the kind of driving force. And those of you who are here for the very first governance bites, we talked about some research that showed how boards and board members add value, and there are a number of different ways. Gee, it seems particularly faint tonight. This is just the light, which we can't turn off unless you're all in the dark. I don't think so. Anyway, all you're missing out on is the lovely colour photos. But anyway, this research showed that there was the ways boards and board members added value was practical helper, being an ambassador or representative of the group outside the organisation, being a buffer to help minimise the impact of outside forces that might distract an organisation from its mission, vision and values, and especially being the values guardian. And one of the things that we talked about there, that although boards can help in all of these 4 roles, the key one, because it's irreplaceable, is the values guardian role. I mean, in the end, you can get practical help from anyone. You can even buy it. So if you want legal advice, you can get a lawyer to give you pro bono advice. You don't necessarily need the lawyer to be on the board. That goes the same with any practical help. But people, you can't buy values guardianship off the shelf. You have to be at the heart of the organisation to exercise that. So that's the kind of irreplaceable role of the board, is being the protector of the mission, vision and values. Does that make sense? It's a 30-second summary of the first 2 hours. That's why, although these are all things to be helpful, ways in which you can be helpful, this is the one that's most important to start with. And that points to the chair's role in keeping clarity of focus and clarity of focus around that purpose in all the things that you do. And there's a really so that keeping clarity of purpose is not an extra task. It's not something extra that people have to do. It's just a way we'll do everything. So essentially what it involves is making sure that every time there's a decision being made or a question being asked, the criteria used to make that decision or answer that question is the mission, vision and values of the organisation. So they become the criteria against which everything is judged. Is it advancing this or is it likely to distract us from it? And a really helpful tool to do that is a decision tree that was developed by a guy called Brinkerhoff. So just take one and pass it on. We won't go through all the details of the tool, but I will put it up here for you, if you can see that. But it basically says, first of all, for all the big decisions, to have at the front of your mind, does this action or decision support our mission, vision and values? And there are some possible sub-questions under there. If no, then you need to go back and start again. But if yes, then you can start asking things like, does this action keep us focused on our priorities? Because there will always be many things in your vision than you can ever do. Then you've got to prioritise. So does this focus on your priorities? If no, go back and start again. If yes, then do we have adequate information to decide, or do you need to do some more research about the topic? If yes, then have we applied the appropriate what he calls business analyses, by which he essentially means the financial and feasibility analyses, and then if yes, have we consulted with the important stakeholders that need to be consulted. So it's very simple, and when you write it down it seems bizarrely simple, but it's interesting how rarely decision making and conversations get structured as neatly and as focused around those kind of questions as they do on the tree. So it's a way of just kind of helping keep that focus. Was there enough to get around? Yep, good. Right. So that's the first C, clarity of purpose. So we're not going to spend too much time on that tonight because we've covered the importance of our mission, vision and values in that first session. The second C is a cohesive board. So as well as keeping the board focused on the right topics, and the most effective chairs help the board work as a team. So that's about the relationships between the board members. Because it's governance and the decisions that you make is never just a technical decision. It always comes back to relationships and how well people can, in the end, can actually work together. And part of that being a cohesive team means that you're looking as a chair to try and harness all the skills, all the knowledge, all the experience of the group to maximise that. Because there's no point in having great people on your board if they're just rubber stamping what's being put up, whether it's by you or by the staff or by anyone else. It's about maximising the different perspectives, the different experience, the different skills that people have got. So part of that is about encouraging full participation, which is why I kind of linked these two topics together. We're going to focus on that a little bit more. But the first step in having a cohesive board is getting the right people on the board and getting the wrong people off the board. Because if you haven't got the right people on the board, no matter how much effort you put into developing a good team or a good working atmosphere or a critical culture, it won't happen if they're not the right people. Now, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because that's our topic for next week, next month. Don't come back next week, we will be by yourself. Next month, on the first Wednesday in August, we're going to focus particularly about how do you get the right people on your board what makes someone the right person, and how can you overcome recruitment difficulties when you're trying to get those people. And then the month after that, the plan is at the moment to look at getting the wrong people off your board. So in September, we're going to just focus on how to get rid of people. And we're going to focus on how you can do that with grace as well. So we won't be issuing people with their own governance knives or other equipment like that. We'll be giving you some other tools that hopefully are a little bit more constructive. But it's we still have to face the fact that having the wrong people on the board can actually bring the performance of the whole board down, and through that the whole organisation. And you spend a whole lot of energy stopping bad things happening rather than creating good things. And it can be very destructive. And you often lose good people when you let bad people, not necessarily bad people, but the wrong people stay on the board. I'm going to be disciplined and not say much more about that tonight, because that will be the special focus for September. But it is a key bit of having a cohesive team, is having the right people there. So that's why I needed to mention it. But especially if you've got the right people there, then it is all then about getting the most out of them, getting the contributions from all the people on the board, and that's a particular role of the chair, to get the best out of all the people in the decision making and in the other roles that the board would take. So I like to say participation is actually the purpose of a board. If participation is not the purpose, you don't have to have a board meeting. You can send out an email. But if you have a meeting, you're actually involving the cost of a lot of people's time. So a 2-hour meeting with 6 people is 1.5 days full-time equivalent. So meetings are not cheap; they're expensive at people's time. But we have them because we get better, more creative, and more sustainable decisions when we have a variety of different inputs. So there's no use wasting people's time without getting all that input from the diversity of views that you're likely to get. Okay, so so I want to talk a little bit more about what this might look like, participation on boards, and I'll start in 2 places. So if you take a go backwards, and you will say go backwards. So get around quicker, because you will need to refer to this as we talk. Some of this stuff from participation comes from what's my favourite kind of practical handbook on this, and it's called The Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making. When I bought it a few years ago, it was a very expensive book. I think it's got cheaper now. It looks very big, but that's because they use very big type and pictures, so which I quite like as well. Come on in. There's some spots at this table over here. But the whole book is about, in whatever role you're in, how you can help groups be more participatory when they're decision-making groups. So this is not about other kinds of teams, but decision-making groups, which essentially that's what a board is, a decision-making group. So it's really focused on that, and I find it very handy. So if you wanted to do one thing to take it a bit deeper, that would be the one book that I'd recommend. So everyone get a copy of. So one of the first things that they talk about is the difference between. So if you look at this page, it's got 2 columns. The difference between participatory groups and conventional groups. And what I'd like you to do is just have a quick scan of some of the characteristics, the differences between the two. And then in a minute, I'll give you a minute or two to do that. What I'd like you to do is each table, or if there's 4 people at the table, divide into 2, and just have a chat with your partner or with the other 2 people in your group about if there's anything in those 2 lists that particularly surprises you or interests you, or you think that's really important, or you disagree with. So, in other words, what stands out when you look at those 2 lists? So, first of all, just 2 minutes to have a look at them, some reading time, and then turn around and have a chat with your peers about anything that stood out from those lists, and feel happy to circle them or identify the points in any other way that you want. So basically, all of the tables except in this one should divide into 2. You can say it. So when you've had a chance to scan through the list, have a chat with the person next to you, anything that stood out, good, bad, or indifferent. In a moment, I'm just going to check if there's anyone who's happy to share the things that most struck them, or someone else in their group said that they thought was significant. Before I do that, I've just remembered that I didn't explain about your placemat. So those of you who are regulars know this is a family restaurant, so this is for you to colour in. So if you're a first timer, I just need to explain that this is for you to colour in and to play with. And to encourage you to do that, I give a prize at the end of each session for the most colourful and/or messiest placemat. So if you are intended to play with it and use it and write down the things that you want to remember. It's always a fabulous prize. It's a secret, I won't tell you what the prize is until it's awarded. So just in case anyone's got too high expectations, I want to assure you it's not a car.
But I really enjoyed my weekend in Hawaii. That was great. I'm holding up for the
Okay. So use that and colour it in, and play with that as you will. Okay. The participatory groups versus what they call conventional groups. Anything that struck people about those lists?
All of them two different boards. One's that's got a small group,
Yep.
and one's quite a large group.
Yes. Yep.
And so you see different dynamics between the two different groups. It's quite considerable, really.
Yep. Yep.
And that you hear about someone who was upset at the meeting. You hear about a week later, like a grapevine.
Yes. Yeah.
From the big group.
Yeah.
Because they either feel intimidated.
Yeah.
Or unable to participate or put their point of view across.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that So
In fact, a very common result of conventional groups are what's sometimes called car park conversations. You know, where the real meeting actually happens in the car park or somewhere else a week later, where people actually say what they think if they don't get a chance to say it in the meeting. Yeah, and I think it is true that it's harder in that you have to be more deliberate to make bigger groups participatory. So the bigger the group, the more you have to structure it for participation. And because there's a common error, I think, that people make that think having no rules is the most participatory. Having no rules is the most anarchistic. So it will lead to anarchy. And anarchy tends to be kind of survival of the fittest. And in boards, that often means survival of the loudest, or it sometimes means survival of the quickest. And people who think quickly are actually not always necessarily smarter. They just think quickly. And some of us need time to reflect before we talk. And some of us think by talking. Yeah. We actually form our ideas by saying them out loud. For other people, it's the other way around. So quickness and loudness is not necessarily a good criteria for getting good decisions, and especially if that silences slow or quiet people, which can easily happen in what they describe as conventional meetings. Does that make sense? Any other things that particularly struck?
Yes, we talked about the fact that we require quite a high level of getting to know each other to get into the participatory.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not going to happen straight away.
Yes. Yeah.
It takes time to get to know people, their views, and the issues that they may bring along.
And the more that we know people as people, the easier it is to fit into that participatory culture as well. I don't think I've told this story with this group, but I was a member of a board where there was another guy who was on that board, basically, I mean, like most boards, 80% of the time everyone agreed, so there was no debate or difference over issues. But on the 20% or whatever it was where there were differences, he and I would always, and I mean absolutely always, be on opposite sides of any difference. And we often sat opposite each other. If you want to oppose someone, sit opposite them. That's the best way to oppose someone. Handy hint, if you want to not oppose someone, put them on your left-hand side. It's really hard to argue with someone there. They're less likely to dominate your thinking and discussion. Anyway, that's an aside. I won't tell you too many of those devious tricks. But this guy and I were always on opposite sides. And the thing that really made a difference was us, I'd like to say it was us sleeping together. And what I mean by that is we went away for a retreat to one of the board members' batches for a kind of review and strategic planning time. And during the day we did the work, but of course you can't be planning and reviewing the whole 48 hours that you're there. So we prepared meals together, we washed up together, we sat around and had chats about and found out about each other's families and interests and things like that. And afterwards, and doing that helped build a much stronger relationship, because what I realised was that I only knew him as the person I always disagreed with on the board. I knew nothing else about him until we spent some time together. So actually having some social time and food always helps, does help build those relationships. You don't necessarily have to sleep with everyone, though, I just want to say, and if you do it safely. But relationships are quite important in this, and they help. I don't know whether we actually ever agreed more after that, but I think we had more respect for each other because we knew we were whole people, not just opposing points of view. And the most vicious conflicts and differences come when the other person is only seen as an opposing point of view, not an actual person. So once we get to know people as people, it helps us disagree with respect and disagree with grace, right, rather than just trying to win an argument. It's not just an argument to win. Great. Any other things that struck people from that list?
So the board, my experience is that the board that I've been involved with has been around for a long time. And I would say that the greenies that we were when we started, and they were a different board then than what they are now, were probably much more conventional in their thinking.
Right.
And as we've spent, well, certainly some of us have spent more time operating a board, we've become much more participatory.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say we've got all the way there, but it's interesting that what you say about Gen focus is really true. When you start to understand your board members' strengths and their areas of expertise and their mode of operation, you start to see them less as competitors and more as people who
And I think it's true also, as you say, it is actually a maturing process to become less conventional and more participatory in terms of these decisions. Though the sad thing is that just being around for a long time doesn't make you more mature. But sometimes boards can just get into bad habits, and the bad habits kind of reinforce each other. And it sometimes does take deliberate effort. So although time can help, we can't rely on it. We have to do some stuff ourselves as well.
Also, that conventional groups are obviously conventional, and that's how everybody behaves, and it takes an effort to be a participatory group. A
bit more deliberate,
because you automatically, if personalities fit where they fit.
Yes, and there are some people who said it's kind of, some of this is evolutionary, that there are primal reasons why we compete to survive, and that when resources are scarce, when there's lots of threats around, that it's the people who compete the best who might be able to survive the best. Though interesting, that's not what Darwin said. He said he didn't say survival. He didn't talk about survival of the strongest. He talked about survival of the most adaptable. Evolution is not about survival of the strongest. But there are some things that do seem to be hardwired into the kind of automatic response that can, if we're not deliberate, if we're not thinking about it, we can easily lapse into that conventional way. And that's why I think they probably did call it conventional. It's not just an alternative way. It's the kind of default way if we're not thinking of being deliberate about it. So it does take work, and it takes extra work the bigger the group, and extra work the less familiar we are with each other, so the less strength of the relationships. Because there will always be things that get in the way of doing this, and some of it's just history and our kind of natural inclinations. The same book that I referred to earlier talks about 4 things, 4 common barriers to participation in decision-making groups in particular. That's what I'm talking about. And that listed in the bottom left-hand side of your placemat. So he calls them self-censorship. So that's where people don't say what they're really thinking, either because they think, oh, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this and I shouldn't talk about, or maybe I don't know as much as everyone else, or for some other reason they don't actually say what they're thinking. And of course, that's the cost of that is we lose their input. Even if we in the end decide not to go with that, it can help inform the decision that we're making, and can help us make it a more robust decision. So self-censorship actually stops participation. The second common barrier that they talk about is fixed positions, or people sometimes say, oh, so-and-so has an agenda. So what is meant by that is people come to the meeting with a fixed position, with a particular agenda that they want to push, and are not really open to coming up with a group decision. Because what we're talking about in boards is group decision making, not just a sum total of individual, whoever has the individual decision makings that, whoever has the most people who individually decide that agree with them. So it's not just the sum of the individuals, but we're talking about trying to have a group decision making. And if people come with fixed positions, then that means that they're, to some extent, not willing to engage in the group decision making, to throw their ideas in, but also to listen to other people as well.
This is the way we've always done it, so this is the way we're always going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And people might represent a particular point of view or a particular value, and that value or that point of view might be useful to put into the debate, but where it gets in the way is when it becomes non-negotiable, or a fixed position. So it's not having a strong view or doing preparation or having a particular view that's the danger, but it's when that view really is seen as, well, I've thought about this, so there's no need to listen to anyone else. That's when it becomes a danger.
It's even worse when people come to a meeting with a fixed view but don't actually reveal it.
Yes. And then just veto everything that doesn't fit it.
Or arguing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's difficult for a chairperson to work out what their motivation is.
Yes.
Because they won't reveal it
Yes.
themselves.
Yes. So people don't always come along and say, this is my fixed position and this is why I believe it.
No, they don't even know.
Yeah.
In fact, it's rather rare for them to do so.
Yeah. A related but slightly different barrier is a win-lose mentality. So that's the idea that this is a competition, and if my ideas don't win, then I've lost. So therefore I've just got to think of arguments for my ideas. And so when other people are speaking, that's a great time for me to think about what I'm going to say next, not to listen to what they're going to say. But it also means that it's kind of like multiple fixed positions. We can't actually get the best of all the options. We have to either win or lose. So it's this false dichotomy between either or, winning or losing, coming out on top or being defeated as an approach. And obviously that's the extreme form, but it can kind of influence us in other more subtle forms as well. And the fourth and final of the common barriers that they talk about is, let's call it a reliance on authority. I call it over-reliance on authority. And that is that some people, for whatever reason in the group, are given by one or more of the participants a particular authority, and therefore she who must be obeyed becomes the response. So if the chair says this, then we all must go along with this. Or if the manager says this, then we all must go along with this because it comes from the manager. In some cultures, people actually inherit those positions, and other people will not say what they think, or not add to the debate because they'll rely on the person who's seen to have particular authority. So obviously that gets in the way of participation by again cutting out all the other people who come along as passive observers, passive riders on the journey, not really actively contributing to group decision making. So all of this comes back to, is this a group decision or just an individual decision dominating the group? So what I'd like you to do is, I've come up, I haven't even forgotten them. I've borrowed these four common barriers, which they haven't been able to find solutions to, so I'd like you to. So we'll just do it in the numbers around the table. So this table can come up with a solution to self-censorship. This table can come up with a solution to fixed positions. This table can come up with a solution to win-lose mentality. This table can come up with a solution to reliance on authority. And this table gets to choose anyone. You're the bonus round. But don't spend all your time deciding which one to choose. Just choose anyone. So I'll give you 5 or 6 minutes, so a little bit of time to think about it, but not too much. So if you were the chair or the facilitator of a meeting and you saw this kind of behaviour, what could you do that would help reduce the barriers, if not get rid of them altogether? Obviously that would be the ideal goal, but sometimes you've got to chip away a bit of your time. So just have a think about what you could do.
No, it's not like me to not have a strong vision, so just enjoy the moment, seriously.
Introductory statements that allow people to feel like they can say what they want to say. So setting some basic boundaries.
What about the What do you mean by that? You know, like what's the encouraging people to identify maybe help decrease the status. Because in their safe environment of behind a computer sitting in their cafe, they can go, I want this on the agenda. And then it leads to
Those people need to be aware that they're not going to be sensitive.
encourages that.
Stating that no select on the computer is going to be everything on the table, work your way around and come up with I guess this is something
so much to do with the organisation. So if the chairperson is dominating wrong, then there'll be lots of chairs that happen because they don't want to go in because she wisdom is there. So they would shut up the chairman.
When they do that, there's times where it's kind of like, yeah, we should use new skill or tackle this issue for us because you're you know, like, yeah, it's a sort of skill, yeah, knowledge and skill.
So if I give you 1 more minute, will you have something to share with the group?
And having that kind of level playing field that no one person's kind of one person's kind of polarised more than anybody else, everyone's equally there for good reason. That's what the consumers want to do, is the consumers are concerned. So it's really careful not to disempower them. And so I like to find that there's no difference, but that's one thing I've always said enough of that they are best people at knowing what is the best way to run this group. Because I've got that joy without being patronizing. It's not patronizing because it's
So hopefully you've got some ideas. I'm going to write them all down and publish them in a book and make a fortune. Okay, so we'll just go in the order that I listen. So we'll start with self-censorship.
So we discussed a few ideas. One of the things that was discussed was that setting some ground rules before you start is very important. So,
Yes, yeah.
If it's made clear to the people around the table that they all have a valid opinion and that nothing they say is going to be treated as stupid,
Yep.
then that might encourage people to say more.
Yep.
And it was also suggested that the chair has a role in actually knowing his or her people. And if you've got people who are prone to being a bit quieter at the table, you make sure you give them opportunities to express an opinion by encouraging them to do so.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, well done. That's going to be the first chapter of the book. Just talking about it is, and it probably applies to almost all of the barriers, is often the best way of starting to tackle it. And the best time to talk about it is before it's a problem. So time travel backwards, and to when this isn't a problem, and talk about how is this the way we want to behave? Are these the values we want to demonstrate in how we work together? And most people will sign up to that. And then when you see kind of people breaching it, then we can say, is this consistent with what we said, how we want to behave? It seems like this means that we're not allowing everyone a chance to speak or whatever. So you can hold people back to stuff that we've collectively agreed. So having those ground rules can be very useful. And as I mentioned, just to reinforce it, the best time to have ground rules is before you have the conflict or before you have the problem. So when things are going well, it's a good time to talk about what are the ground rules and how we want to operate as a group. Some people consider that as kind of wasted time and we've got business to decide, but it actually means you will save a lot of time and energy down the track by investing in that little bit of preparation up front. It's like sharpening the saw. It's like seeing that time spent sharpening the saw is wasted when you've got to cut a lot of wood. Not really. Cutting a lot of wood with a blunt saw takes a lot longer than wasting a little bit of time at the beginning sharpening the saw beforehand. So it's the same with getting some basic ground rules that are values-based that people can sign up to. And there are some specific things, as you said, like calling on people, giving more time to people who are reflectors. So if you know people take time to think about things. And also respectfully shutting people up. So if there are some people dominating, you say, oh, that's great, Garth. That's a great idea. I wonder if anyone else has any other ideas. So both physically, by turning your back or your side to them, you're saying, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And you're also saying, has anyone else got any ideas? But of course, and recognise their contribution as well, because that's an important part. Even if they are a quick thinker and a loudspeaker, doesn't mean they've got stupid ideas. And that can be a useful part of the discussion as well. But it's about kind of sharing the airtime around. You can do that deliberately. And I've got a couple of techniques that apply to probably all of these that I'll talk about in a minute when we look at sort of particular methods. But really great ideas from Group 1. Group 2, can you match that with your solutions to fixed positions?
If you ask the person why they've come to that decision, it gives them time to explain why they've come to it, and it may be that you change your mind because they've got a valid point, or it may be that you can then discuss some of those particular issues and address those concerns.
Find other ways of answering their principles that's not necessarily the solution. If you dig deep, that's a great idea. So it's about trying to find out what's behind, and what you're also doing there is you're demonstrating to that person that you've actually heard and are listening to what they're saying. And if you can in any way, what really needs to happen is to help people with fixed positions hear others. So So this is an occasion where turnabout talking becomes really important, and talking across each other is really counterproductive. I mean, it's not useful most times, but it's really counterproductive if people have got fixed positions, because what you especially want to do is give people a chance to walk in the other person's shoes, to see things from the other person's perspective, which requires some kind of listening. You can even ask people, how do you, to explain each other's point of view. So why do you think so-and-so so strongly believes this, which is counter to what they believe? So there's a way of trying to help people get into someone else's shoes, someone else's perspective. Well done. Thank you, Richard.
We get a chapter as well.
Yeah, you get a chapter as well. No, you only got applause from me. Everyone else thought. No, they're all writing it down. So furiously. So I forgot to ask which one were you?
We self-censorship as well.
Self-censorship. So we'll do your answers for that as well.
Now?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yep. What we've come up with is probably similar to your group too, so probably on the same sort of page, and we might...
Same chapter anyway.
Same chapter, indeed, yeah. So we sort of thought if we identified somebody who was very quiet, and probably because of self-censoring themselves, we thought firstly is to ask open-ended questions to that person.
Yep.
So, if you're going to ask for a closed question, well, you're going to get yes or no, and that's all you're going to get.
Yeah.
So, ask a nice, good, open-ended question. We also thought before the monthly meeting, or however often you do meet, and the agenda's getting formulated and sent around to everyone, and probably the chair at least anyway, is to ask for somebody's input everybody's input to the agenda. So,
right.
Got the meeting next week. What would you like to say? So there's an inviting sort of platform for you to jump in, and therefore hopefully at the meeting they're going to come out a little bit as well.
Ownership with the items. Yeah.
And any good board should have people with a mix of skills and experience, and I think it's to acknowledge somebody's experience and skills and say, well, hey Jeff, we know you're really strong in this area. What do you think? Really want to hear.
Yeah.
And then just acknowledging that contribution at the end of it anyway.
Yes.
So they didn't think, well, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
That's
Great.
Kick it
Well
around.
And just to underline that last point, so if it's someone who usually doesn't speak up, every time they speak up even a little bit, reinforce that even over the top, so that the small steps to contributing become more and more positively reinforced and encouraged and supported. Don't wait for them to come up with a full eloquent speech before you say that was great. But every little step along the way can be useful too. Great, thanks for that. So we'll go back to 3, which is win-lose mentality.
I think we came up with 2. One was to play devil's advocate, so you confront the winner and try and switch it around a bit later so that they don't continue to win.
Right.
And your one was to compromise.
Yeah.
So that we all kind of reach a position where there's consensus.
Yeah.
But it's not a clear winner. It's how much you prepare to move a little bit down the road.
Yeah.
Just lose a little bit.
Yep. Well done. Thanks. And especially, compromise doesn't have to be a watered-down version of 2 alternatives. It can be like a 3rd alternative. So part of this is looking for third ways that don't fall into the either-or trap. And a technique that's useful for that is the one that Table 2 suggested about saying, well, what is the reason you think this is the best way? What's the principle behind it? Because the more you get back to the principles or the purpose or the reason, the easier it is to kind of craft some agreement around those, whereas people can disagree about particular solutions. and you can take bits of each of them and try and get, creating third alternatives, synergies, so that there's a kind of win-win situation. Because that's what you're aiming to do. To move from this win-lose to win-win, so everyone feels A, they've been heard and they've got a part of the answer, and and you're getting everyone's wisdom, so it's probably going to be a better answer as well. Well done, thanks. And the fourth table, reliance on authority.
We didn't get too far in this discussion, but I do think what would be important is to recognise the person's knowledge.
Yes.
And at least let them know that you do see that they know a lot on that subject.
Right, yeah.
And then perhaps ask to give others a chance to learn to have the same experience.
Yes, yeah. I have to confess, this is the one I always have the greatest difficulty with. There was a setup, and especially because although there is some kind of hierarchies in any groups and some reliance on authorities in Kiwi culture, when you move into some other cultures, it's even more rigid and clear-cut and unambiguous. And I do a lot of work in Samoa and Tonga, where there are very clear authorities, and you would never speak out against someone who was in a position of more authority. It basically goes kind of chief, minister, minister's wife, chief's wife, and speaking chief, and then others like that. So I always have difficulty with this. But what I have found is it's a little bit like building on what you were saying. If you try and fight it, you just go to be killed. There's no way. So you've got to acknowledge that. And what you ideally want is the person who has the deferred authority to acknowledge that others have useful things to contribute as well. So we were doing this case study of basically a village behaving quite badly, looking at good governance and bad governance. And there was a case study of a village behaving well and a case study of a village behaving badly. And the worst behaviour was being done by the minister in this village, church minister. And in this case, fictional case study, and everyone was saying, "Oh yeah, this this was at least they did this." So I'm trying to find the good things in it. Until we had in the group a minister's wife who said, "Well, I thought that minister was atrocious. He wasn't showing any Christian behaviour at all. He should have done this, and that." And then everyone said, "Oh yes." So she kind of burst the bubble. So it's basically, if what I've found, the little bit of success I have found that is if you form an alliance with the person in authority and say, "It would be really great to hear other people's points of view as well, wouldn't it? Could you help me?" So you're relying on them as a helper and an ally to get other people's points of view out. Especially in those cultures where it's very strong, they have to speak first, or no one will know what to say. So it's impossible.
Probably a good example that you can sort of draw a parallel with is that in some military organisations they'll do a deliberate debrief with take off all badges of rank for the debrief, so that everyone has the symbolic status, so that someone can say, okay, well this went well or this went badly, and without being in that rigid hierarchy.
So that's a very good idea when people are willing and able to do that, to symbolically say, we're taking off our roles here.
It's been symbolic. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, could you also do it so you try and, so the chairperson tries to, in a nice, respectful way, shut that person up so they don't speak first, and kind of open the floor and say, I know, I'm sure you'll have some interesting thoughts on this. Let's talk, let's hear what other people
I think you can. I think that works if it's self-censoring. That's the problem. But I think if people are really relying on the authority and want to just go along with someone else's decision and don't want to take responsibility themselves, then it makes it hard for them, and you'll end up with an enemy of the person with authority. So that's why I think if it's possible to build an alliance with that person, usually before the meeting, and maybe I'm talking about in a more extreme situation than we're likely to confront, but the only way I've found through it has been building an alliance with that person, not trying to oppose them or get wrist control from them. That's just my experience.
We've benefited from still having meetings when we've put a date on them.
Right.
So actually, nobody's that important that you can't have your board meeting if somebody can't come. And I think naturally what that has done is stopped anyone being the authority because it's made.
We can't have a meeting without Garth there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's kind of a nice way of doing it without.
But you need to have a meeting without Garth. If you can't have a meeting without him.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about before. And what you'll find on the back of that sheet is 4 kind of principal participatory values, and basically those values relate to the barrier. They're the best kind of antidote for the barrier. So that the principle of full participation is the antidote for self-censorship. The value of mutual understanding is the antidote for fixed positions. The principle of inclusive solutions is the antidote for win-lose mentality. And the principle of shared responsibility is the antidote for deferring to authority. So again, that reinforces, if you talk about the principles of participatory approaches first and get people to think about what they are and sign up to those as a kind of way we want to behave, way we want to run our meetings, then that can help address the problems before they arise. Okay, I'm speeding along, sorry, but there's a couple more things I want to cover. One of them is participatory methods. You may or may not be able to read those bubbles on the overhead, but they're the same ones that are on your placemat. And you'll see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 participatory methods. Most boards use 2 of these 80 to 90 to 100% of the time. Which 2 do you think are used almost exclusively?
Presentations and reports. And open discussion.
Yeah. So presentations and reports and open discussion. And as I said before, sometimes people think having no rules is the most participatory, but all that means is it just encourages the loudest people, the best prepared people, quickest people to talk. So open discussion, which is basically anyone gets a chance to talk, is one of the least participatory methods you could invent for a group of people to make a decision together. Yet ironically, it is the structure that we use the most in boards, even when we're thinking we want to be participatory. So there are all those other methods around there as well, and all of them are much more participatory. Just have a look at them and see some of those terms you'll probably not be familiar with. So some of them I made up, so that's you won't. I know you won't be familiar with, unless you're pretty good guesses. But so find the ones that you don't know what they mean, and also check that you know what it would look like, each of those methods. So So anyone spotted one they don't know what it means or unsure what it means? Yeah.
Structured go around.
A structured go around is just so each person speaks in turn. So you go around the group, but you do it in turn. So that's the structured go around. So you say, okay, I'd like to hear what everyone thinks about this proposition. Just your main thoughts at the moment. We'll each take a turn. You go around.
Can you start at different spots?
But you can start wherever you want.
Away from the person.
Might be, yeah. Or put them in the middle. Because also there's a risk of giving them the last word. Yeah. And so why is that participatory?
Because everyone gets a chance.
Yeah, everyone gets a chance. And in fact there's a pressure on everyone to say something. So even on the self-censorers, they've got to come up with something. And if you know there are people who are going to be intimidated by that, don't ask them to be the person you start with. Give them at least some thinking time. If some people are going to find it harder to talk off their feet. But usually this would happen after some discussion, so people have had a chance to already think about it. You wouldn't necessarily do it cold. Any other ones that people are unsure what the term means? Popcorn comments. So popcorn comments are unstructured go-rounds. So what it means is that everyone has one comment, so it's like, the corn can only pop once, but it can happen in any order. So if you've got a bunch of people who you know take longer to think and are not going to want to just do it in a rigid order, then this might be a more useful way to go. So same rule is everyone is only allowed to speak once until everyone has spoken. But you can do it in any order. So as people are thinking of something. So you might do this more at the beginning of the discussion when people are still thinking and working out their ideas. Does that make sense? How that could be participatory? Any other ones that don't make sense or are unclear? Fishbowl. Yeah. So this is where you put usually a couple or a small number of people in the middle somehow. They may be physically in the middle or conversationally in the middle, and everyone else is observers around them. Now, at first, this sounds very unparticipatory. But some participatory ways you can use that. If you're in a conversation, in a discussion, and there are two people who have strongly opposing views, and everyone else is shut up because these people are very strong and that they've got all the arguments and they've thought it through and hold these views very strongly. What you can do is formalise that by having a fishbowl and saying, okay, it sounds like that you two have got the strongest views on this. So everyone else just listen to their views. So we'll have 10 minutes of you talking about the pros and cons of this approach. So we'll all hear the two sides to the argument, if it was a two-sided argument. So they have their chance to do that, which they would do anyway if they've got strong views. And then say, okay, now all the people who are observing, I want all of us to respond to that. What are the things that appeal to you? What are the things that you think could be problems? And the fish have to shut up. And just the people on the outside who get a chance to talk. But they get a chance to talk with the advantage of all the arguments and ideas and information that those involved people have. Because often the involved people might have more information than other people because they've done it before or because they've got some particular experience or skills. So it's not always the case that you want to shut that up, but you want to make sure it's got some limits. Fishbowl is
that actually infers too that the whole group's making the decision.
It does.
Yeah.
So it's a nice way of kind of reinforcing that idea of shared responsibility. Any other ones that are not clear?
Multitasking.
Okay, so by multitasking, what I mean is this is where you divide into small groups but are given different tasks. So small groups is where you're divided to discuss something and then come back to the whole group. But it's the same thing that each small group is discussing. Multitasking is where you divide into small groups and each come back to the whole group, but they're doing different tasks. So, first of all, why would small groups be more participatory?
Everybody is comfortable.
Yeah. So if you've got 10 minutes and you've got 10 people in the room, if it was shared equally, everyone would have a minute each. If you've got 10 minutes and you divide them into 3 groups of 3, 2 or 9 people, then they've each got 3 times as much to speak in the small groups. Also, some people are much more confident speaking in small groups than in a bigger group. So I'm talking about pairs and threes usually. So for the quieter people, that can help them bring it out. And the other advantage is if you get the groups to report back, people have had a chance to rehearse their thoughts. So the people who don't think by talking, the other half of the population get a chance to rehearse before they have to say it to the whole group. So they're often much more comfortable in doing it. All on the same topic, so you're getting all different responses on the same topic. But sometimes you actually want people to do some more thinking about different aspects. So you're planning a fundraiser and you say, well, could you two just spend the next 10 minutes thinking about options for venue? Could you two spend the next 10 minutes thinking about a big attraction that would get people to come there? Could you two spend the next 10 minutes thinking about what time of the year or a day of the week would be best to do this? So everyone gets to go into more depth of at least one aspect, and then they come back with the ideas. And again, the whole group makes the decision, but the research has been, or the thinking has been done in a bit more depth.
I'm going to think asking somebody to report back to the main group, they have to produce more than their own views.
Yes,
Before the way to start breaking up that fixed.
It does, yeah. That's I hadn't thought of that before, but that's a good way of how we put someone into another person's shoes.
Role plays have that effect too.
Yes, yeah. Role plays is probably something I don't often do in your board meetings. There are gentle role plays and radical role plays. The radical role plays is where you ask someone to actually act out a particular point of view. And it is about getting someone to put themselves into another person's point of view or shoes. But you can do what I call gentle role plays, and say, okay, we're thinking about this big new development. What I want us to do is not think about it from anyone else's point of view, but let's just think about it from the point of view of our clients. What would be the most important things that the clients would want out of this, regardless of anyone else's point of view? Or, so that's what I call a gentle role play. You're asking people to come from a particular perspective. And then you might say, what are the staff going to want out of this? Or, what are our funders going to want out of this? I'm making it up, so it's getting more and more ropey. But you know the idea that you can get people to kind of put themselves in other people's shoes without actually, putting on a false moustache and a hat and acting something out. Idea listing is sometimes called brainstorming, so you might be more familiar with that term. So, and the big rule about pure brainstorming is that there's no analysis until all the ideas are put up. So that you collect ideas without comment or judgment, and then you analyse them separately. So that's a good way of saying there's no stupid questions, or it's great to have 10 silly ideas because we get the one good one out of it. So it's a way of just generating lots of different ideas, and then you go back to a second stage of analysing what are how realistic is this, what are the advantages of these options, whatever. And writing and reading tasks, again, that might seem strange, but what it does do is put everyone on the same footing as, say, the reflector the person has to think things through before they can come up with a conclusion. So I ask people to write down, the 3 most important characteristics that we want this fundraiser to achieve, or something, whatever. So it's an individual task, but it gives people a chance to have time to come up with the ideas, and also can help self-censorship, because if people have written it down and you say, now I'd just like you to read what you've written down, it's much harder to say, when they've got a whole page full of those, I didn't write anything down. People can be gently coaxed into saying what they've written down that they might not have said without prompting, as well as them preparing, giving them some time to think about and prepare for it. I think we've covered everything, haven't we? Yeah. So all of those techniques are absolutely familiar to trainers and absolutely strange in most boardrooms. But there's no reason why they shouldn't be. The main reason we don't use them is they look like too much fun. And that's one of the reasons why trainers use them, so that people have fun in workshops and things like that. During the course of the series, I will have used all of those methods to a greater or lesser extent. I've used at least half of them tonight already. And it's quite natural in a workshop setting to use them because you're wanting people to participate. The bizarre thing is that we seem to balk at using them in decision-making meetings when we want people to participate. You will get resistance if you suggest using these ideas because they look like fun. That means they can't be real work and they can't be serious. And our board is serious. So that's often the kind of the barrier or the objection to using these different methods rather than just open discussion. So it's worthwhile having the kind of rational conversation beforehand that open discussion is the least participatory method. If we're serious about participation, one new one. But the other thing is just to do one new thing at a time, not introduce all 10 of them, and don't start with full-on role plays as your first one. Gentle. And when people see that you can have fun and actually get better decisions and be more participatory all at the same time, people tend to relax on the rule of no fun at our meetings, please. Which seems to be the main unwritten rule of most board meetings. So when you're suggesting that you have rules for meetings, maybe someone should suggest that is the first rule. No fun should ever be had at our meeting. And then when people knock it down, then you can say, okay, well, we can have fun. Okay. I'm almost there. The third C is about constructive relationships, and this is about the relationships between the chair, the board, and the manager. That kind of triad is an important set of relationships that the chair has a particular. All the parties are responsible for their own part of that relationship, but the chair has a particular role as the kind of conductor or orchestrator of those relationships and of paying attention to that. And the big lesson there, which we talked about in the second workshop that we did, is about getting the balance right and being clear and agreed on who is doing what, and keep talking. Keep talking to each other and treat each other with respect. But the lots of different governance models, as we talked about in that second session, and they're all about what is the role of the manager versus what is the role of the board. The only bit of research that's been done on these competing governance models shows that there's not one model that's better than the others, but actually the most effective model is the one that you have. So basically having any model will help you be a more effective board. And what's behind that is, if everyone is clear and agreed about who does what's each party's role, it almost doesn't matter what the division is or where the line is drawn. As long as we're all clear and agreed about it, it will work. It will work well. and because there's a lot of evidence that very different ways of dividing the line work equally well. And in particular, with small groups, boards tend to be much more involved, and with big non-profits, boards tend to be much less involved in the operation of the organisation. And they can both work really well, or they can both be disastrous. And the critical difference is whether it's clear and agreed who is doing what. So the problems come up with lack of clarity or uncertainty. That's when the relationships start to break down. And the other key thing here is making sure that all the parties respect each other. And I don't know how you do that. But I think having that as an objective is less than important. While they're talking about it, so that people who want the best of the organisation will do their best to respect the other party. I have one little exercise that I sometimes do with boards, which is called the board love letter. I borrowed it from marriage guidance counselling, and one of the tools that's used in marriage guidance when relationships are kind of rocky is they ask each of the partners to go away and think about when they first fell in love and write a letter about what they respect and appreciate about the other person. Because one of the reasons relationships break up is we obsess over the little things that irritate. Why do they do the toothpaste that way? Why do I always have to clean around the toothpaste cap when I'm in the bathroom? And I won't get too personal, but you got to get the so that the little things grow and grow, and we get focused on the things that lead us to have less respect for the other person. And the idea of this is kind of going back to what first attracted us to the organisation, because hopefully you haven't fallen in love with the manager or board, other board members, or if you keep it to yourself. And what you truly respect about the person. So the only ground rule that I have when boards or managers are writing these love letters to each other is that you can't use irony. It has to be real. So if you're really annoyed that board members are turning up late, you can't say, "I really appreciate that you're on time." You have to find something else. You have to ignore the things that you don't appreciate. Just focus on the positive. And it does actually work. It does actually help build regard and respect by helping people discover those little islands of respect you have that you can build on. But that's about the limit of my ideas about how you might build respect.
I think you have to say that the chairman's got to show that respect.
You've got to demonstrate it.
You've got to demonstrate.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go through this because these are less. I want to make sure you get home on time. So that will take us to the last C, which is considered decision making. Part of considered decision making is what we talked about last month's session about having good agendas that are designed to make good decisions rather than just the way we've always set out the order of things. So if you weren't there, I really recommend you have a look at that session because agendas can make a big difference. And we also talked about there having an annual agenda so that the board sets its plan for the year, not just for each meeting one by one. And we talked a little bit about consensus decision making, which is really about participatory decision making. It's about people feeling like they've been heard and that there's been a fair enough process and that they can live with the decision. So consensus doesn't mean unanimity. Unanimity can be a kind of false groupthink that actually leads to self-censorship, the problems we're talking about. But real consensus means people feel like they've been heard, the process for making the decision was a fair one, and they can live with the decision even if it's not their ideal. And that is much more possible than unanimity all the time. So those are bits of revision, but I also just wanted to talk about a little bit about the dynamics of group decision making. Well, that's it. Talked about that. But I had a slide for it as well. Okay, so group decision making is different from individual or personal decision making, and if participatory or engaged boards require this kind of group decision making. So we need to shift our thinking, and often we don't even explicitly think about what makes good group decision making. So sometimes people have a kind of model in their head that a new topic is introduced, all these new ideas are put together, and then we reach a decision in a nice, orderly, logical manner, going from A to B. Lovely idea, but it's just a myth. The real world is much messier than that, and that's not how groups actually make decisions. That probably means one person is making the decision and everyone else is going along with it. So that's individual decision making with the group. Sometimes when a new topic comes in, people will kind of go off in all kinds of different directions, and it will feel like, oh, we're losing control. And especially if you're the chair in that position, as soon as you feel like losing control, the first impulse is to impose control and to bring things back into order. And that can mean that we're just trying to end up stifling discussion because we're afraid that it's all going in contradictory directions that are not necessarily helpful. And sometimes they are contradictory and sometimes they're not helpful. But in fact, what's happening here is the normal process of group decision making. Good group decision making, not bad or failed group decision making, but the normal process of good group decision making. When a new topic is introduced, we will start to get different ideas about how to solve the issue or make the choices or set the priorities. And if you allow more than just a short burst of time, you'll get more and more divergent thinking. And this is where innovation and creativity comes from, applying that divergent thinking to the issues. And the diversity of ideas increases by allowing enough time for them to come out. Because initially what happens is that we will initially just rehearse the familiar opinions or the solutions that we've already tried, because that's where we start with what we know. Now, if this is just a minor, non-controversial decision that we're not looking for creativity, that's fine. You know? So if you're just saying, which night of the week should we meet next year, and we all know that Wednesday suits most people best, then you don't need to have a big to-do about it. You can just check that Wednesday still suits people the best, and no one's put out by it, and then quickly make a decision. You don't need to go beyond the familiar options and the familiar opinions, because you're not needing creativity or innovation. But if all the young people on your board are not coming, you might need to think, well, is it something about the time that we're meeting and the fact that it clashes with the block? You know? Is that the critical factor? So we can't have our meeting on the night when the block is on. So we need to think about something more creative. But if we don't, that's perfectly fine for quick decisions in familiar topics that we're not looking for creativity. But where we want to explore possibilities, we need to allow time to get some of these more diverse perspectives into the discussion. And the amount of time will depend on the group and its ease of raising new ideas and just the capacity of people to spark new ideas as well. But we will need more time beyond the familiar opinions to get the diverse perspectives into something. So when it is a big decision or somewhere we know the past solution has not been working, we need to find something new or we need to innovate, then we need to not close it off just after the familiar opinions and the familiar options have been rehearsed. We need to allow time for that divergent thinking. Now, as soon as we do this, some people in the room will become immediately uncomfortable because it's not neat. It's starting to look like it's out of control. Especially if you're the chair, that will be, you'll find a rising concern in your stomach at this point, especially if you're not familiar with this model, because there is a stage beyond this. And there will be some people who will say, oh, we've tried that before, or there's no point thinking about that, or why fix it if it's not broken? And basically all those things that people are saying, I can't stand all this discomfort and uncertainty. I want to get back to things I know and am comfortable with. Let's stop the discussion. And as I said, that's okay if you're only looking for sorting out amongst the familiar. But if you want a solution that's different from what you've got now because what's now is not working, or if you need innovation or creativity, it will equally block all of those things: innovation, creativity, and new solutions. So people think we're stuck, we're wasting time, we're just going into dead ends about this, and we'll want to hold it back. Now, the good news is, if you can encourage these people to stick around with this discomfort, you can reassure them that we're just in the divergent stage. We're generating the ideas. We're finding new ways of solving this. In a moment, we're going to come back and be more orderly. We're going to be less blue skies, less crazy ideas. We're going to be logical and analyse the pros and cons, the feasibility, the costs of all of this, and come up with a solution. So we will come to that point. And that's what convergent thinking about. So this is where we sort and sift the options, where we cluster similar ideas together, where we put things under themes of what are the ideas behind them. We're basically trying to categorise, analyse, shortlist, and then evaluate. So pros and cons, positives and negatives, costs and benefits of all the different options. The trouble is, if we do this too soon, we will lose the benefit of all of those options. Okay, so as I said, there are some people who love blue sky thinking. So as soon as you start to allow this to go on a little bit longer, people will think you're wonderful. Some people, they'll think, oh, it's great, it's the best meeting we've ever had. I can spitball all these crazy ideas and weird thoughts that I've had late at night or in the shower, and we can think of something new and creative. There are some people who really get off on that. And there's some familiarity, or similarity rather, of those people with people who are their right brain dominant thinking. The people that I mentioned before who will be irritated by this have some overlap or similarity to what's often referred to as left brain thinking. So left brain thinking is the logical, sequential, ordered way of part of our thinking, the part that helps us read and write and do maths, and logical thinking. And the right brain thinking is the spark of creativity, the wacky ideas, the innovation, the blue skies thinking, basically being creative. So some people will love this and hate that, and some people will love this and hate that. The big lesson from how groups make decisions is to recognise that, but still keep people in the same thinking mode together. So what's disastrous for group thinking is some people thinking divergent thinking while others are trying to do convergent thinking at the same time. You need to say, let's all do the divergent thinking together, let's all do the convergent thinking together. You have to, the thinking types you have to do as a group. If one's in one style while the others are in another style, you'll just be talking past each other. So one group will think the others are just fuddy-duddies who can't think of a new idea if their life depended on it, and the other group will think the rest are crazy fairies in the sky who couldn't come up with a practical solution if their life depended on it. So we need to take each group through both processes. So just telling them that they each will have their day in the sun sometimes helps, because people fear that there's only one way of doing things. But also recognising that some people will have more to contribute at the two different phases. So the right brain thinking people will have more to contribute at the divergent stage, and the left brain thinking people will have more to contribute at the convergent stage. We want everyone to be talking in the same terms at different times, but don't expect everyone to have the same capacity to contribute at each time. But also don't expect people to have nothing to contribute. We've all got something to contribute in both, but some will have more than others. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, so I'm going to try a little test now, because there's a little bit left brain in me. I'd like to do a check that people got what I've been talking about. So in these envelopes are not the tickets to an overseas cruise, but there are two sets of descriptors, one which apply to divergent thinking and one which apply to convergent thinking. And there's a title that says divergent and convergent. So what I'd like you to do is to just sort, as a table, sort these into the two piles. Convergent pile and a divergent thinking pile. Anyone need any more time? You're right. Okay. So I've just swapped these around for a moment because it fits with a picture that I'll show you in a second. But so I've just swapped them around. But starting with the divergent, going out, diverge. What's one element that you had in the divergent thinking?
We've got free for all open discussions.
Free for all open discussions? That's great. That's definitely in there.
Unpacking what's behind the problem.
Unpacking what's behind the problem. Yep. That's definitely in there.
Gathering diverse points of view.
Gathering diverse points of view. Yep.
Generating alternatives.
Yep. And generating alternatives. Yep. So they're the divergent thinking characteristics, and therefore the other ones are the convergent thinking. Evaluating alternatives, summarising the key points, sorting ideas into categories, arriving at general conclusions. Okay, so you got it all. That's great. Well done. I think the most useful. Oh, sorry, and the picture is just my right brain, left brain picture that goes with those, so that the this is from the back of the head, which is why it's the wrong way around. Yes. Yeah. Okay. The usefulness about this model is that it helps us actually work as a group to make decisions, which is what you need for group decision making. Surprise, surprise. And it reminds people who have different preferences. You may have your board stacked with all of one sort. You may have all the divergent thinkers or all the convergent thinkers. So one of the things this also helps you to do is to be on the lookout next time you're recruiting amongst the other things, to have the missing ingredient there as well. So if you're missing any divergent thinkers, have one or two divergent thinkers. If you're missing any convergent thinkers, have one or two of those. We're going to be talking next month about recruiting people, and so that's not the main criteria you'll use to recruit people, but it's one other thing worth having in mind. The other thing is if you talk about this model with people, it actually helps them deal with the complex dynamics of decision making, and especially the last thing, which I haven't spoken about yet, which is the really tough bit in the middle, which they call the groan zone, for reasons that it is the most uncomfortable bit, because it's the bit at the end of the divergent zone. There'll be lots of different competing frames of reference, but before you can start to sort, refine, and conclude, you need a shared framework of understanding. So the shift in moving from divergent thinking to convergent thinking is also the time where you have to shift from these divergent perspectives into having at least this one set of criteria to make the decision. You won't have the decision yet, but you need to have an agreed set of criteria or just agreed questions. If you're all asking different questions or all have different criteria, you can't really generate a group decision because you're all still heading in this divergent competing frames. So that's why it's uncomfortable because you have to make that shift. It also means you're shifting from left brain to right brain in different modes of thinking. So it's always good to have a little break or some point to signify that you've got to start thinking in a different way, because we don't do that normally. Once we get into one way of thinking, it's very hard to shift. So it's an important reminder to do that. But I think when we do this, we are able to achieve much more creative, innovative, and useful big decisions. As I said, this is not about the small decisions where, for business as usual stuff, we can actually make them without going through this pain. But if we really need something that needs a different solution because the current one's not working, or we need to have some innovation or creativity, then we'll need to go through some process like this. And the more we understand that, the easier it is to go through it, because there'll be lots of pushback otherwise because it's not always comfortable for all the people all the time. So this helps us kind of deal with the pushback by knowing that it's a process that we go through. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So I'm conscious that I am rushing things through, but that covers the 4 C's. As much as I'd like to take credit for coming up with the idea of the 4 C's, because I like things that all start with the same letter and that kind of stuff, it actually comes from a little ebook called A Chair's Compass, a guide for chairs of charities and non-profit organisations. And if you email me, I'll email you back a copy of this ebook. So you can just read it. It will come back as a PDF, so if you don't have an e-reader, you can just read it on the screen, or you can even print it out, old school. But it's easier for me to email it to you than to print out lots of copies of it, cheaper anyway. So I'm Garth, Garth, at lead, LEAD, .org.nz. Garth at lead.org.nz. Okay. So the last thing that I just want to spend our final 5 minutes on is this is to talk about the future of this program. So we were originally funded by Rata Foundation for an introductory session at the end of last year, and the five sessions. We didn't have one in January. 5 sessions. This year. This would have been the last one. They've agreed to extend this to the end of the year, so that's 5 more sessions. So the last one will be in the first week in December. We thought they were happy to do 6, but we thought having one in the first week of January is probably not a good idea for my ego if no one turns up. So we'll finish. It seems more sensible to do 5 more, and we'll finish in December. And the first week of December seemed to be still early enough that it's not hit by all the end of year. Does that sound reasonable to people? So so we've got a couple of topics which people have already in earlier stuff expressed an interest in, and I've mentioned those already tonight. So the plan is for August to do getting the right people on board, and September to do getting wrong people off the board. But that then still leaves October, November, and December. I've got a couple of suggestions from other groups who have done this. And also, I'd be really interested in your ideas of any other particular topics that you've got. So when we finish up in a moment, I'm going to give you a. This is going to mean that's going to drop. Oh, you can still see it. I'm going to give you some green stickers. So I'll give you. We've got 3 months, not done, so I'll give you 3 green stickers to vote for what topics you would like us to cover. And I'll have some pens on the table here for you to add in any other topics as well to that. But I think we'll finish up the session first, and then people can do that. So the other thing that we need to do to finish the session is to award the most colourful and messiest placemat. So we have some potential entries in that. Oh, this is a very colourful one here. A very colourful one over there as well. And one at the back here. Yes. Right, okay. So, if any of you finalists